This is Money Motivation to Mike, and I am your host, Michael Wainwright, in charge of all the controls, audio engineer, Jason Wright. And hello to you, world. This is the show that will change your life. You can contact us at info@mx3.vip and find all of our content at mx3.vip or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content, which comes out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. Jason, the time has came. I have left the audience standing and waiting, hopefully sitting, over the last several months, talking about these 1990s Cowboys. But before we get into that, just over the last 28 days, our watch time is up 170%. And our subscribers is up 68% over the last 28 days. The views continue to go up a little over 21%. Thank you once again for the listening audience, and you continue to just blow us away with your listening and viewing audience. I feel very, very comfortable with the content that we bring to you. It seems to be exactly what you're wanting to hear while we continue to upgrade and work as we enter 2024 coming up here in the next month. So, without further ado, the 1990s Cowboys, going back over what we talked about in the last episode. And by the way, Jason has now put a timer on my screen because I was not aware of the fact that just building the 1990s Cowboys took me 40 minutes. We didn't even get into 1990. We just talked about building the team. And, well, as you can tell, we got a lot of information. I'm kind of passionate about this subject. But going back over that 10-year history from 1990 to 1999, the Cowboys making the playoffs, 8 of those 10 years, winning the NFC East 6 times, 5 in a row, 3 Super Bowls, including 3 out of 4, which at that time was the only team to have done that. Since then, the New England Patriots have done it, and winning 12 playoff games during the decade, which really was from 91 to 96. Winning that first playoff game in 1991 against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, the only time the Cowboys have ever won a playoff game at Soldier Field. And then ending by beating the Minnesota Vikings in a wild card round at the old Texas Stadium in the 1996 season, beating the Vikings, I believe, 40-15. And then that would be the last victory of the triplets of the team of the 90s, et cetera, beating the Minnesota Vikings for the 1996 season, 40-15. Now, moving on, as we all talked about, 1989, as we all know, 1989, 1-15. And quickly in 1990, the Cowboys moved to 7-9. Obviously, Emmitt Smith's rookie year. Now, on the last game of the season, on a Monday Night Football game, the Rams were playing the 49ers. Back when the last game of the season was on Monday night. Now the last game of the season is on Sunday night to give the teams an equal, 6 to 7 days to get ready for the playoffs. But back in those days, 1990, the 49ers already had their division and the conference number 1 seed wrapped up. But if the 49ers could have beaten the Rams, the Cowboys would have actually made the playoffs at 7-9 in 1990. Now, of course, the 49ers aren't going to do us any favors, and they were also resting players, which I don't understand, because they had a bye coming up the next week, Jason. I think it all had to do with the Dallas Cowboys. Nevertheless, their days were coming as we had it all planned out. 1991, moving forward to 1991, and the team going 11-5, started 6-5. Remember, Troy Aikman got hurt. 6-5, got hurt at Washington, which was a victory. And Steve Berline comes in and leads the Cowboys on 5 straight victories, beats the big bad Philadelphia Eagles number 1 defense up in Vet Stadium in Philadelphia. Finished the season 11-5, and then win that first playoff game at Chicago. Now, interesting fact, all we know about the 1990s Dallas Cowboys was Hall of Famer, Super Bowl MVP Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman did not start the first playoff game for the 1990s Dallas Cowboys. Steve Berline did. Now, the reason being, Jimmy Johnson's all about winning and the hot hand. Berline had won 5 games in a row. And he let Berline start that game at Chicago and play that entire game. Aikman supposedly was healthy. Next week, they go to Detroit, and we get it handed to us 38-6. Guess who started that game? Steve Berline. Steve Berline started the first two games. Steve Walsh won the first ever game of the 1990s Cowboys, which was actually that 1989 victory, 1-15. So a lot of things happening there that people don't remember. We all think about the glitz and the glamour, but there were some rough times because after that 91 season, there were rumblings that Troy Aikman wanted to be traded. Told his agent it's time for him to move on. But during that offseason, Jimmy Johnson, being the leader that he is and was, goes to Aikman, tells him it's his team, and here we go. Because remember, this Berline doing this stuff on the back end of drafting Steve Walsh in the supplemental draft. Obviously, you could see where Aikman's heart and desire and thought process probably was. It wasn't the best. But we roll into 1992 after getting shellacked by the Barry Sanders Detroit Lions up at the old Silverdome, Pontiac, Michigan, long time ago, because now they play downtown at the Ford Stadium, Ford Center, whatever they call it down there. 1992, now it's starting to get going here. Now, once again, start the season off 3-0. We are rolling. And on a Monday Night Football game, the Dallas Cowboys go back up to the Vet in Philadelphia on Monday Night Football. Herschel Walker, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, and a guy that obviously had a whole lot to do with the 1990s Dallas Cowboys roster, they beat up on the Dallas Cowboys 31-7. And no one had any thoughts that the Cowboys would end up in the Super Bowl that year, because not only could they not beat the 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles, the 49ers were the front runner who had been to the NFC Championship game 3 out of the last 4 years, and obviously were the favorites to go again. But after going 12-4, the Cowboys come to January the 17th, 1993, when they beat the San Francisco 49ers at the old Candlestick Park, going all the way back, being built in 1965. They beat the 49ers 30-20 to clinch the first Super Bowl appearance since the 1977 season. Now, many Cowboy historians call that NFC Championship game the best game that the Dallas Cowboys have ever played. And it was epic. And frankly, at that time, the Dallas Cowboys may have not been the better team, but they were better prepared, and they were rolling. The 49ers were good. 49ers were good all through the 90s when Dallas was beating them. You got to remember, they come back. The Cowboys won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. The one they didn't win was to the 49ers won that Super Bowl. So it wasn't like the 49ers were on the fade, kind of like what people think Dallas Cowboys were on the fade in the 1980s when the 49ers beat us in the catch game. But nevertheless, this 92 season starts out by us. I mentioned that we got beat 31-7 on Monday Night Football early in the season, and then Dallas comes back and beats the Eagles 30-10 in the first playoff game. It was 30-3, and they completed a pass on the last play of the game to make it 30-10. As a matter of fact, they took the kickoff and drove like 8-9 minutes and kicked a field goal. Total control. Field goal, obviously, is not 7 points, but then Dallas scores the next 30. The rest is history. Herschel had a fumble right before half. Dallas got another touchdown off of that. So we have to go to Super Bowl 27 in Pasadena, California, the Rose Bowl, where Dallas totally dominated 52-17. Just beat up on the Buffalo Bills. The defense was phenomenal. Scored a couple of touchdowns. That was also the start of the legend of Leon Lett picking up the fumble. The Cowboys had 9 turnovers. The Bills had the 9 turnovers. The Cowboys recovered 9 of those turnovers, interceptions, and fumbles. Leon Lett picks up a ball late in the fourth quarter and rumbles about 60 yards, 55, 60 yards. We all can see it. It was Don Beebe from the Bills chasing him down. and catching him right at the goal line, knocking the ball out, and it not becoming a touchdown. It becomes a touchback. Now, if Dallas had scored that touchdown, they would have scored 59 points in that game. The most points ever scored in a Super Bowl to this date is 55 by the San Francisco 49ers in 1989. Leon Lett, Jason, received death threats because he messed up the Dallas Cowboys holding the record for the most points scored in a Super Bowl. Another big event in that Super Bowl, remember, this is 1992 season. Throughout the 1990 was the 25th Super Bowl. At the 25th Super Bowl, the NFL figured out they needed to up their act and start having more glamorous halftime shows. Because for many years, it was local bands. Grambling State Band was one. Went out in California. The Kilgore Rangerettes were always a part of those halftime shows. Whatever the local band, wherever the school, like Houston hosted a Super Bowl. And I think the Texas Longhorn Band was the halftime show. That's what it was. They started having big acts starting with Super Bowl 25. Here's Super Bowl 27. And the halftime show was Michael Jackson. This is when halftime shows became a show in itself. This is when people would tune in to watch the halftime show, which we now know is a big, major thing that comes along with the Super Bowl. You've got the game. Sometimes, lots of times, the game's not that exciting because one team dominates. Over the last couple of years, it's been a whole lot better. But a lot of people who are not necessarily football fans tune in for the commercials, which is always a premiere of some new commercial that will be ran for the next so many months, if not the year, and then the halftime show. And that really kicked off at Super Bowl 27. Of course, at Pasadena, several miles down the road from Hollywood and Beverly Hills, just a great place to do it. Michael Jackson, being a Los Angeles resident, what a great thing. Troy Aikman, MVP of that Super Bowl, and all is good until next year. What happens when you win? People want more money. Emmitt Smith had already won the rushing title several times, 91 and 92. He wanted more money. He holds out the first 2 games of the year. Dallas gets blown out on Monday Night Football against the Redskins, and then the Buffalo Bills, who we just beat in the Super Bowl, comes in and beats us at Texas Stadium, and the Dallas Cowboys are 0-2, and that's when the Jimmy Johnson press conference, somebody asked him a question in his legendary, oh boy, because he didn't know where we were going to go from here. Jerry Jones finally gives in, signs Emmitt to some money. We get him on the roster and go on and win the next Super Bowl. Now, in that during that time, the Cowboys had 2 7-game winning streaks. So they were 0-2, won 7 in a row, which then went on a couple of more. We lost on a Sunday, and Atlanta came back for Thanksgiving Day game. Your first ever game, Jason.
Yes, it was.
The old Snow Ice Bowl, 1993, which was another legendary Leon Lett moment of running down after the field goal was blocked right there in front of us, which is why we have this Miami Dolphin hat sitting here on our table, because it was our first ever game together. And I think I've mentioned on this show, after that all debacle, and you should go and pull that up and watch that play. But Leon Lett was suicidal that night. A couple of guys on the team spent the night with him, spent the weekend with him. Now, the great thing to that is that was the last game the Dallas Cowboys would lose that year. They would go on and win 7 more games in a row to go, they'd go on and win 8 more games in a row. They won 7, lost 2, won 7, lost 2, won 8. Because they end up finishing the season with 5 victories to end up becoming the number 1 seed, the first team ever to go 0-2 and win a Super Bowl in the same year. Went 12-4. Now, I failed to mention in the 92 episode, or the 92 conversation, that Dallas was the first time Dallas had ever won 13 games in a season. They went 13-3. Then we go to 94. Obviously, during the 94 offseason, Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones could get their differences. It's another episode that we'll touch on in depth. But Jimmy ends up resigning, not necessarily getting fired, even though we all know that he got fired. Call it whatever you want to call it. And in comes Barry Switzer, the old ball coach from the OU Sooners, 3 national championships, etc., because he had coached Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones as a graduate assistant at the University of Arkansas on that 1963 national championship team. So they all had roots. They all had the things that would allow them for Jerry to go and hire Barry Switzer. And I think I've also mentioned before, Barry Switzer was his second choice in 1989 to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys if Jimmy Johnson didn't want the job. I do not believe that things would have turned out the way they did if Barry Switzer had gotten the job instead of Jimmy Johnson. No doubt about it. And I'm a big believer in Barry Switzer, but he would not have been capable of doing, from a personnel standpoint, what Jimmy Johnson did. Nevertheless, Cowboys go 12-4 again. Play the Green Bay Packers in the first round for the second year in a row, and then go out and get beat by the 49ers 38-28. There were some highlights to that deal, which is the robot Troy Aikman throwing 3 interceptions and getting us in a hole of 21-3. The Cowboys did battle back, and Michael Irvin had 200-plus yards. That was the game where Emmitt Smith didn't play much, had double hamstring injuries. It was also the game, people don't remember, it was 38-28 basically at the start of the fourth quarter, just a few minutes in. And Dallas had the ball at midfield. And Aikman throws the ball down the left side towards the end zone to Michael Irvin, and he gets mugged by Deion Sanders. Just pass interference if there's ever been pass interference. And they don't call it. And this is inside the 5, Jason. You're at least getting a field goal, if not a touchdown. At that time, Cowboys were rolling. You would think that their chances of scoring a touchdown at this time would have been great. Barry Switzer comes unglued because the call wasn't made. He gets a 15-yard sports sideline conduct warning, flag. Mm-hmm. Backs us back. Now, instead of being like around the 50, you're back in your own end on the 35. That was the end of that. The rest is history. And the 49ers go on and beat the San Diego Chargers in the Super Bowl 29. So now we move to 1995. Still same thing. Jimmy Johnson no longer with us. Barry Switzer's the coach. And Dallas once again rolls to a 12-4 record. One note there, opening night in the rain in the Meadowlands. Dallas opens up and beats the Giants 35-0. They had just signed their all-pro cornerback, Kevin Smith, to a large contract, blows out his Achilles in the very first game. So now we need a cornerback. Deion Sanders, that's back in his baseball, football at the same time days. And when he went to the 49ers, it was just on a 1-year deal. So now we come to 1995, and Deion Sanders is a free agent, but it is September, and he's playing baseball for the Atlanta Braves. So as time went on, Jerry Jones steps up, and I believe at that time, $35 million contract in 1995. I think it was a 5-year $35 million contract. Gets Deion to the team, and it did make a difference, no doubt. You needed that cornerback, that your all-world cornerback had basically been gone for the season because of what happened. Now, on the last game of the year, which was Monday night against the Arizona Cardinals out there at Sun Devil Stadium, Emmitt Smith scores his 25th touchdown of the year to set a new record for the most touchdowns in a season. That's worth mentioning. Cowboys go on once again, play the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round. The Green Bay Packers go out and upset the 49ers and come to town. So Dallas beats Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game. I want to say 38-27. It was 38-27. And then go on and play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 30, which was very special to me because growing up in the 70s, the Cowboys and Steelers played in a couple of Super Bowls back then. And here they are playing in the third Super Bowl, the third time the two had met ever in Super Bowl 30. Still the only two teams that have met three times in the Super Bowl. Dallas gets a little revenge, wins that game. Now, ironically, I told you Deion Sanders comes in, takes over the cornerback spot midseason for Kevin Smith. And of all things, they're throwing the ball to the other side of the field. Larry Brown, the other cornerback out of TCU, we touched on him last week, being a 12th rounder, comes up with 2 interceptions and wins MVP of Super Bowl 30. I failed to mention that Emmitt Smith was MVP of Super Bowl 28. Once again, I've also said it should have been James Washington. Hey, but that's okay. Switzer then joins Jimmy Johnson as the only two coaches to win a national championship in college and a Super Bowl in the NFL. And happy to say that both of those things accomplished while they were wearing Dallas Cowboy uniforms. After the 95 season, we did go into 96. That's when off-the-field activity started. Unfortunately, a lot of it was directed in the area of Michael Irvin. Love Michael Irvin, one of my favorite Dallas Cowboys of all time, but he was suspended by the league at the start of 1996. That put us in a hole, I believe 1-4 at that time. Dallas did battle back all the way in 96 to win. They started 1-4 and they went 10-6. They got it going. Won the division in 96. Did not get a week off and hosted the Minnesota Vikings in a wild card game. The last win that this group of 1990s Cowboys would ever win a playoff game, by beating the Minnesota Vikings 40-15, because the next week we go out and get beat up pretty good by the second-year Carolina Panthers. Yes, Carolina Panthers were one win away from going to the Super Bowl in year number 2. So we go on to 97. Cowboys started out 3-1 in 97 and ended up 6-10 by losing their last 6 consecutive games. Once again, more off the field, discipline problems, major distractions, and Switzer gets fired, even though it was a resignation, and he's gone. And by the way, I think the people on the listeners and the viewers on this show know I'm a OU fan, but the same thing that happened to Switzer in the 80s ended up being his debacle in the 90s with the Dallas Cowboys, as things got crazy up at OU, and that's how the reason that Switzer was pushed out with the OU Sooners. And now basically the same thing's happening with the Dallas Cowboys, which then brings in Chan Gailey, who was for the 98 and 99 seasons, he was the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the offensive coordinator in Super Bowl 30 when the Cowboys beat the Steelers, and comes right out and goes 10-6 in his first year. Now, a couple things about 1998. Going into the 1998 season, the Dallas Cowboys, now the reason I mention this off-the-field discipline problems is because when we get to the draft, we're going to draft Randy Moss. Randy Moss also had off-the-field difficulties at several universities. That's why he ended up at Marshall. Best receiver in the draft, undoubtedly. He wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy. You put Michael Irvin on one side and Randy Moss on the other. They're in the late heyday of the 1980s. And because of Michael Irvin's actions off the field, along with a few other people, we had to go with the choir boy, Greg Ellis. And I remember Greg Ellis played at North Carolina. And we draft him in the 98 draft and pass on Randy Moss, which we still regret to this day. Don't know if it cost us a Super Bowl, but it definitely cost us some more excellence in that late 90s that we could have accomplished. Nevertheless, I remember Mack Brown then being the head coach of the Texas Longhorns, who had coached Greg Ellis at North Carolina. And he said, quote, something along the lines, Greg is the kind of guy you would let babysit your kids. And I knew when he said that, we were in trouble, because we needed some thugs, we needed some dogs. We did not need any more babysitters. Maybe we need some more parental guidance is what we needed. And obviously that wasn't going to come from Barry Switzer. So we ended up taking Randy Moss. We ended up taking Greg Ellis over Randy Moss, and the rest is history. Go 10-6, move into 1998. Host the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals had not won a playoff game since 1948. 50 years without a victory. And they roll in here with Jake the Snake Plumber and basically beat us. It's 20-0 real quick. They end up beating us 20-7, which ends up being the last ever playoff home game for the Dallas Cowboys of the 1990s. Roll into 1999. Now, big event happened up at Vet Stadium in Philadelphia in 99 when Michael Irvin drove into the, I don't know if I want to call it the turf. Let's just call it the concrete, because that's what most of the players who played in Vet Stadium called it. Was just like playing tackle football out on your front driveway without the pads. So Michael Irvin gets driven into the turf. We're going to call it turf because there was some green out there, and then gets carted off on a stretcher. They had unscrewed his face mask out of his helmet. He is getting wheeled off on a stretcher to a standing ovation at Veterans Stadium, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, Jason. The independence, the Liberty Bell, and they're booing Michael Irvin. That was the last game he ever played. We go 8-8, beat the Giants on the last game of the year, and make a wild card round. Have to go to Minnesota. We go up to Minnesota, a team that was being quarterbacked by Warren Moon at that time, for the last ever playoff game of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys. Go up there and get beat 27-10, and shortly after that game, within weeks, Chan Gailey was fired. The man is the only coach in the history of the Dallas Cowboys to take the team to the playoffs. Every year he coached the team. Now, I know he only coached them 2 years. He went to playoffs both years and got fired for Dave Campo. Dave Campo got 3 years. As we move into the 2000s on the next episode. So as great as the 90s were, Jerry Jones had 3 major hiccups. Two and a half major hiccups. Number one, he could not work it out as a leader should with Jimmy Johnson. Too many great accolades going on for me not to get some credit, and he's admitted to that. Not drafting Randy Moss in 1998 because of some of his own doing of not keeping the troops in line, and the Cowboys not staying on the field and spilling out into all the negativity within the off the field issues. And then firing Chan Gailey after 2 years. So you think about this. Jerry Jones at this exact moment is responsible for firing every coach in Dallas Cowboy history. Hadn't thought about that.
Nope.
Tom Landry, 29 years. Hey, he fired one of the coaches before you ever even played a football game. Nevertheless, the 1990s were great. I was fresh out of college and was enjoying those on a big time scale. The 3 Super Bowls, 25 touchdowns, 12 playoff victories. You think about this. The Dallas Cowboys won 12 playoff games in 6 years. In the 4 years of the 3 Super Bowls, they won 10 playoff games. Since we beat the Minnesota Vikings in the 1996 season, the Dallas Cowboys have won a combined 4 playoff games in 28 years. And I can remember every one of them. You win that game in 96. You don't win your next game until 2009. 13 years. Now, that was the first year of the new AT&T Stadium, the Jerry World deal, beat the Eagles. But that's the first time you win a playoff game since The 96 game against the Vikings. 13 years. Win it in 14. Win a playoff game against the Lions in 14. Win a playoff game at home against the Seattle Seahawks in 18. And then last year's victory over the Tom Brady-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2022. You win 12 games in 6 years. You've won 4 games in 28 years. Thank you for the 1990s. Unfortunately, some of us still have to live in the 1990s. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things you see in this studio right here is all about the 1990s. You can always reach Money Motivation and Mike at info@mx3.vip, and you can find all of our content at mx3.vip or on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@mx3podcast. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell icon to get notified of all of our content, which comes out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. So for the 1990s Dallas Cowboys and everyone who's been a part of this show, continue to live your life the right way.